from a really broad range of partner agencies, and I would really like to thank you all for taking the time out of what I appreciate for all of you will be really busy timetables. Most of you won't know me, so just to introduce myself, my name's Hannah Ellingworth and I manage the North Yorkshire Safeguarding Children's Partnership. To start with, I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of the Safeguarding Children Partnership, and then we'll talk to you for just a couple of minutes about why you're all here before handing over to Jenny and Wayne from the NSPCC, who are going to be running the session. So just a little bit of housekeeping first. The session will be recorded. You'll have had to agree to that prior to joining today's session. For copyright purposes, there's a small section of the meeting that's not going to be able to be recorded. So once we get to that part, Jenny's going to let me know to stop the recording, and then we'll let me know again once the recording's able to be restarted. When that happens, Teams will mute your mic and turn your camera off. And in order to sign back in, you'll have to turn your camera back on. Now, if anyone has any problems getting back into the meeting, please can you either email myself or Kirsty Chuley. Kirsty, can I just ask if you put yours and my email addresses in the chat, please? And then we'll try and help you if you have any difficulties. The recording and slides will be available via the NYSCP YouTube channel. And again, we can put that link in the chat. So if I could ask people just to keep their cameras off, I think as Kirsty said, they've probably been disabled, and to keep your mics on mute unless you're talking. And this just helps with connectivity. And then any questions, just whilst I'm talking, if you feel free to use the chat function. Okay, so let's make a start. So who and what is the Safeguarding Children Partnership? Now, I'm hoping that there is at least one familiar face for at least some of you on the slide. I'm going to take a guess that the majority of staff from Children and Families Service know Stuart Carlton, who's the Director of Children's Services. Police colleagues will recognise Scott Bissett as the Assistant Chief Constable for North Yorkshire. And health colleagues may be familiar with Michelle Carrington, who's our Director of Nursing. Stuart, Scott and Michelle are the three safeguarding partners as they manage the three statutory agencies, and there are three strategic leads. The partnership is made up of health, police and the local authority as statutory agencies. The other face on the left of the screen is Heather Pearson, and she is our independent scrutineer. It's Heather's job to act as a critical friend to the partnership and to support and scrutinise the way in which the partnership works to support children and families across North Yorkshire. So just to give a bit of an idea of the function, so working together legislation outlines the requirements for the three statutory partners, so health, police and the local authority, to agree on ways to coordinate their safeguarding services, act as a strategic leadership group in supporting and engaging other partners, to implement local and national learning from serious safeguarding incidents, and all three partners have equal and joint responsibility for local safeguarding arrangements. So the purpose of these multi-agency safeguarding arrangements is to support and enable local organisations and agencies to work together in a system where children are safeguarded and their welfare is promoted, where agencies collaborate and co-own a vision, where agencies can hold one another to account, where there's early identification and analysis of new safeguarding issues and emerging threats, and where learning is promoted and embedded. And we try and do this in a way that local services for children and families can become more reflective and implement positive changes to practice. So who are our wider partners? We have the three statutory partners, the health, police and the local authority, but we also have a number of relevant agencies who make up the wider Safeguarding Children Partnership. So education settings, the voluntary sector, criminal justice, providers of health services, adult services, youth justice, faith groups, Youth Voice Executive, to name some but not all. And it's fantastic that today we've got a really good spread of attendees from a variety of those groups. So why are you all here today? As a safeguarding partnership, we've identified the need to develop a multi-agency strategy for identifying and responding to harmful sexual behaviour, addressing this from the early identification stage through to supporting young people within the criminal justice system. Our shared aims are to ensure that we have an overarching harmful sexual behaviour strategy that meets the needs of all children, young people, their families and practitioners across the county. We need to start by understanding the prevalence of harmful sexual behaviour with a plan to develop a single integrated approach to the management of this. We need to support practitioners in how to work with children and young people to educate them about harmful sexual behaviours in order to prevent incidents, and we need a shared language and shared assessment tools for how to talk about it, recognise it and respond to it when it happens. So how are we going to do this? Our starting point is why we're all here today. So it's to ask you all, as a cross-section of our safeguarding partners and relevant agencies, to be involved in the initial audit that's going to be undertaken by the NSPCC. We will be randomly selecting partners from across the county to be involved in the completion of the audit, and that's really to help us understand the current picture of harmful sexual behaviour in North Yorkshire, as this will help us to ensure we develop the best strategy for children and young people. Now, for those of you not selected to take part in the audit, we still very much need your engagement and support with the process, as you'll be part of the ongoing development of the strategy. This is so we have you around to think about the promotion of training and other elements of the work. So please don't be disheartened if you're not selected to be part of the audit, but we still very much will want your input. So thank you very much for attending today. I'm going now to hand over to Jenny and Wayne from the NSPCC, who are going to take over the remainder of the session.
Thank you, Hannah. That is great. I will just share my screen. Just bear with me. Okay, and if somebody, if somebody can give me the thumbs up when you can see it.
We can see it, Jenny.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. And I've just got to say that what a wonderful turnout. So thank you very much for giving us your time this morning. And thank you very much for all the wonderful work the partnership have done to kind of talk about this event today and the work that's going to happen as a result of North Yorkshire completing the HSB framework with us. I've just got I just had a couple of housekeeping bits, but I think Hannah's covered most of the things. So what I will say is, from a safeguarding perspective, so we're unable to give any case consultation or advice around any issues that you're currently dealing with in this session today. So please do use your local safeguarding procedures and support mechanisms if you have any concerns about a child. And please do look after yourselves today, because we are going to talk about some tricky topics that can be sensitive. So if you need a break throughout the session and you need to step away, feel free to do so. That is absolutely fine. We will be touching on HSB obviously throughout the session, but this isn't training as such. We're going to do a little bit of awareness raising and share some information just to get everybody on the same page. We would love to hear from you as part of this session. I know it's such a big group, which is fantastic, but if anybody is willing and happy to share their thoughts or comments or views, there will be points where we ask you a variety of questions throughout the session. We'd really encourage you, if you feel confident to do so, to kind of put your hand up and give us your thoughts. That would be really appreciated. I think Hannah has covered all the elements of this, so I will not spend too much time on this slide. But what we'll cover, so this is really important. We've obviously already done the welcome, but what we just ask you to do as a starter, just so we're aware of who's in the room. And we'll do our introductions in a second, but whilst we're doing those introductions, if anyone could just pop their name, role and organisation in the chat, it'd be really helpful just to give a flavour of kind of who's in the room and who we're talking to, so that would be much appreciated. My name is Jenny Nicholson. I'm an implementation manager at the NSPCC. I am focused around anything relating to child sexual abuse. So I work with safeguarding partnerships and external organisations on improving their responses to harmful sexual behaviour and child sexual abuse. And then we have a variety of other things like training and interventions that we support external organisations with. But I lead on the harmful sexual behaviour audit process. So I will be have been working with North Yorkshire for the last 6 months to get us ready to this stage to be able to launch the event, and we'll be continuing to do so right through to the action plan stage, but we'll talk more about that later. So yeah, if people can just continue to pop their name, role and organisation in the chat. I'll just hand over to Wayne, if that's all right, just to introduce himself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Wayne Dessy. I'm an implementation support officer in the same team as Jenny, and I'm here to be a bit of tech support for Jenny today. So I'm going to be looking at the chat. So if you've got any questions that you feel, you might want to kind of ask but aren't relevant to the particular section, then please, don't feel that you need to save them to the end. Pop them in the chat, and I will flag them. And I'm desperately trying to not press the wrong button. And it's great to see everyone's introduction. So yeah, so thanks for that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Wayne, and thank you, everyone. That's really helpful. And then what we're going to cover is we're going to look at what is harmful sexual behaviour, just to set the scene and get everybody on the same page in terms of the definition and kind of what we're talking about today. Then we're going to look at recognising harmful sexual behaviour. Then we're going to have a little break because it is quite a long session. And after that, what we do is we talk much more specifically about what the HSB framework is, what the audit process is, and what the next steps are. The idea is that those who are selected to complete the audit, if they are on this session today or they watch the video recording of it, they are really clear in terms of what they need to do with the audit when they get it. And there will be an opportunity for questions at the end, but like Wayne said, please don't wait till the end. Please do feel free to ask questions throughout. We want to make it as kind of informal as possible and really encourage you to ask any questions that you might have as we go through. Okay, so I thought it'd be really important just to start off with kind of setting the kind of current national perspective around child sexual abuse and harmful sexual behaviour, because no one can escape the recent events over the last couple of years in terms of reports and research that have come out and different strategies. So obviously we had the ICSA report in 2022, which really emphasised the devastation and harm caused by sexual abuse cannot be overstated, and the impact of sexual abuse is lifelong, and everyone should do all they can to protect children. And we know that HSB is a huge part of child sexual abuse. I think what came out in terms of the JTIA inspection report was that lack of confidence amongst professionals in terms of preventing, recognising and responding to CSA, which is what we see in every audit that we do with every area. So that's really common and absolutely fine. And what we're kind of aiming to do is really increase that confidence. In terms of the Home Office strategy around child sexual abuse, so it was important to highlight that they wanted to ensure all victims and survivors of sexual abuse are able to access timely, consistent and high quality support services that are appropriate to their needs. And then particularly focusing around harmful sexual behaviour and education. So back in 2020, some of you probably remember that Everyone's Invited website was launched and really kind of held a spotlight up on the sexual harassment and the harmful sexual behaviour that was taking place in schools. As a result of that, there was Ofsted's rapid review, and Estyn in Wales did the same, which highlighted that sexual violence and harassment in schools and colleges. And I know that one of the comments in the Ofsted report was to all kind of educational institutions was, even if you don't feel like this is an issue, then you must assume that it is happening because the prevalence is so high. And as a result, the Keeping Children Safe in Education guidance was updated. Now, I kind of wanted to, I kind of wrote some notes because I don't know if anybody saw the latest report from the National Police Chiefs Council that came out in the last couple of weeks. There was a Guardian newspaper article about it. And it said that 52% of alleged offenders were actually children, compared to around a third a decade ago for sexual abuse offences. And offending by adults against children was usually more serious in terms of the scale. However, a quarter of those cases, so of those 52%, related to the making and sharing of indecent images. It was predominantly boys offending against girls, and there was kind of a high feeling that it was due to the free access to pornography and violent pornography. The most common place for those offences to take place was in the home, with around a third, and actually 8 out of 10 victims actually knew the offender as well. So really kind of, again, just emphasising, the prevalence of harmful sexual behaviour and child sexual abuse. So just really important to kind of know what's going on in the world in this sense. So in terms of harmful sexual behaviour, we use the research and the definition derived by Hackett, Simon Hackett, who we work with quite closely. He's one of the kind of leading experts in harmful sexual behaviour in the UK. And it's defined as sexual behaviours expressed by children and young people under the age of 18 years old that are developmentally inappropriate, may be harmful towards themselves or others, or be abusive towards another child, young person or adults. The term harmful sexual behaviour is used to describe a continuum of sexual behaviours, and we'll look at the continuum in a second, but down from inappropriate to problematic and then to abusive. And we can't escape the huge role technology plays in the lives of children and young people. And there is a definition around technology-assisted harmful sexual behaviour, which refers to one or more children engaging in sexual discussions or acts using the internet or any image creating, sharing or communication device which is considered inappropriate and or harmful, given their age or stage of development. So this behaviour falls on a continuum of severity as well, from the use of pornography to online child sexual abuse. So it's really important and we all know that kind of the children don't differentiate on and offline worlds maybe as we do, as people who didn't grow up in the era where we grew up with that sort of technology. This is Hackett's continuum of behaviours, and this is very much what we use. I know Simon Hackett recently spoke at the, I think it was the Education Conference in North Yorkshire, so we are aware that this continuum is going to be updated, and there will be a new version of Simon Hackett's continuum coming out in the next few months. So once that happens, we will update kind of all our resources and everything we do, and we will use the new version. And really the new version is the only kind of tool based upon current UK research and information. We're very much looking forward to it kind of being shared publicly, because we believe it's much more contextualized and practical, with much more kind of examples. Just for those who are familiar with the continuum, that's what it's going to look like. It's going to be slightly different. So the continuum of behaviours that Simon Hackett developed in 2010 ranges from healthy, typical behaviours to inappropriate, problematic, abusive and violent. And there is a green, amber, red rating category across that continuum, from those normal green behaviours, because we know that part of healthy child development, they develop curiosity and things, and developmentally expected behaviours take place. It's consensual, mutual, reciprocal, and there's often, you know, that shared decision making, all the way up to those red behaviours where there's a victimising intent, there's maybe some coercion or force involved. There's a lack of consent and that misuse of power, and it can also range up to that top end in terms of physically violent, intrusive, for example, sadism. So we are talking about a huge range of different behaviours that are within the continuum. And this bit is so important. So we like to talk about risk and need, because I think what we often find with working with different organisations who work with children, hearing from different professionals in different areas, but that there's such an importance around balancing risk and need when talking about young people who display harmful sexual behaviours. The real importance of the language used to describe young people is really critical. We've got many examples, and you only need to look in the press if about this sort of, you know, if any sort of activity around harmful sexual behaviour. You might hear children and young people described as monsters. You might hear them described as predators, as mini paedophiles, all this sort of language to describe children. And that very much represents the risk side of the scale. That language is really inappropriate. These are still children first that we're talking about. And these are on a secondary basis, children displaying these behaviours, and we really need to kind of unpick that to understand why and what support they need. It's a real balancing act, because on the one hand we've got this kind of scary language being used, this reluctance in terms of managing that risk that those children may pose to others, but on the other side you may look at it and look at the need side of things and think, okay, I'm thinking this child or young person might have experienced some trauma, there might be some mental health needs, they might have been experienced abuse themselves, and that's thinking about that need of the child. And the important thing is we need to focus on both so that we don't miss anything. So if we just focus on the risk, we are then missing the chance to be able to help and support that child. And if we just focus on the need, then we may miss the chance to protect other children. So it's really important to kind of think about that balance of risk and need, and acknowledge that it is quite challenging to deal with as well. So what we need to do is kind of just acknowledge that it's quite challenging, but also always take into account that risk and that need. Really avoid labeling. Like, that language is really important in terms of when you're talking about harmful sexual behaviour or recording any information, describe the behaviour explicitly in terms of what behaviour happened. So all these things are really important when dealing with harmful sexual behaviour. This hopefully kind of goes some way to dispelling that myth and links back to the language in terms of talking about children inappropriately who display harmful sexual behaviour. So sexual offences had the largest fall in reoffending over the last 10 years to 13.2%, which is the lowest of all offence groups. And as with other types of adolescent offending, most young people, once they've identified as displaying harmful sexual behaviour, do not go on to sexually offend as adults, particularly if there's been the right preventative interventions and support. So that really gives us hope in terms of working with children around these behaviours, that they won't go on to reoffend as they get older. It's really important that the interventions are focused on broad-based behaviours and developmental goals and not just preventing further sexual abuse. I know Hackett's research says that they estimate that only 3 to 12% of children are treated, kind of supported for HSB go on to sexually reoffend. So what we wanted to do is just kind of ask everybody a couple of questions around harmful sexual behaviour. So we're going to ask you to post true or false in the chat, and the statement is 15% of all reported child sexual abuse in the UK involves other children and young people. Do we think that is true or false?
We won't be picking on individuals, by the way, so there's normally a bit of a pause here before the first person pops their answer in. But yeah, we will be asking for some feedback, but we won't be picking on anyone individually. Mainly falses so far, Jenny. A couple of true, but someone's put false, it's higher, more false.
That's great. Is the general consensus false?
Yeah, generally false, and 3 or 4 people have put it's false because it's higher.
Yeah, absolutely right. It is higher. The more research that comes out, the figure seems to get higher each time there's a new piece of research. The NSPCC use the term around a third. Again, Hackett's research suggested somewhere between 20 and 60% of child sexual abuse involves other children and young people. Obviously, we know it's difficult because the nature of sexual abuse, there is a real underreporting. So, you know, we only can't, that's based upon those things that come to the attention of agencies. The most common place for abuse to take place is at home by a sibling, and then the next most common is in a school setting. And then the next one is harmful sexual behaviour and child sexual exploitation are not linked. Again, post true or false in the chat.
Yeah, just false so far, Jenny.
Brilliant. Yeah. I think it does feel, it feels quite an obvious thing, doesn't it, in terms of false, because harmful sexual behaviour and child sexual exploitation are so linked, and they are not simple or fixed categories, but there is such overlap. We use this diagram just to kind of show the overlap when we're talking about the overlap. Now, I know a lot of professionals may look at this slide and think that overlap section in the middle should be so much bigger because there is so much crossover, and there is. And again, to go back to the research, again from Simon Hackett, looked at CSE cases, and in over 60% of those cases they had aspects of harmful sexual behaviour. And now we know there's been a lot of focus on child sexual exploitation across kind of multi-agency safeguarding partnerships, and rightly so. But what it is important to acknowledge as part of that is that HSB is such a significant part of that as well, of that picture. I think what happens often when we're working with areas, which is great, is that they have a lot in place already around child sexual exploitation, and many of those systems, processes, support networks can be used as well, kind of align and provide support around harmful sexual behaviour. So thank you very much for kind of sharing your thoughts on those things. That's great. Now we're going to go on to kind of recognising in a little bit more detail. And first of all, we wanted to talk about those tools that are around to identify and respond to harmful sexual behaviour. So we very much kind of use the Hackett continuum and the Hackett research to kind of base our work, and our workers use that in their day-to-day, excuse me. But there is also the Brook traffic light tool, which some of you may be familiar with. Brook is also a brilliant tool, and good, easy to use for professionals. But I think what's really important is that consistency across those multi-agency teams in terms of the tools that are being used, the understanding and things like that. That makes things so much easier. Excuse me, I just need to take a drink. However, the similarities with those tools is that they all use a traffic light system to categorise the sexual behaviours of young people, and they are designed to help professionals. And they're excellent guides to help you make decisions about safeguarding, assess and respond what the appropriate action is, and understand what healthy sexual development is and distinguish it from harmful behaviour. Sorry, I would get a cough mid-presentation, wouldn't I? Apologies. So this, we're not expecting you to be able to read this slide. This is an example of a resource that's available on the NSPCC website around responding to children who display sexualised behaviour. And it's the Hackett continuum. And it goes from green, amber and red and shows developmental typical behaviours, and then gives you suggestions about what the appropriate level of response is like. As I touched on earlier, when the new Hackett Continuum comes out, what we'll do is we'll be replacing our resources to update it with the latest research and the most up-to-date tool. However, you know, what will be consistent is likely the RAG rating system, and we believe that it'll just be much more contextualised. Although for those of you who were present in the presentation you did in your area, you may have a lot more details than kind of I do at this stage. In addition
Jenny,
to that,
sorry, Natalie just mentioned the fact that the Brook traffic light tool is behind a paywall. I don't know if you've mentioned that already, but thanks for pointing that out, Natalie. And the Hackett is free, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Natalie. That's a really good point, and something I should have said. So the Brook traffic light tool is now a paid for resource. So you have to do some training and you have to kind of pay for a license to be able to use it. Yeah, and Hackett is free, and the new version will also continue to be free for public use. So yeah, really good point. In addition to kind of the Hackett continuum, there is also the continuum of assessment that's available, which just complements and builds upon the resources that's available, which includes behavioural elements, different levels of assessment that may take place across the continuum, possible frameworks and tools you might want to use, and what the likely focus of the intervention. And again, these are all available online. And if for anyone who would like access to them, we can make sure we email them over to the partnership to circulate. What we're going to do now is just look at green, amber, red behaviours in much more detail. So we can just really think about what's our understanding of the continuum and those behaviours that some children and young people may display. And then we're going to try and apply it to some kind of scenarios that we're going to share with you. So green, typical healthy behaviours reflect safe and healthy sexual development. We know that children are naturally curious and will experiment in consensual activities as they develop. They will develop from a sexual development perspective as well. They're displayed between children or young people of a similar age or developmental ability, and that is really important. That similar age of developmental ability, the kind of appropriate level in terms of that reflective of that natural curiosity, and those activities or any conversations that take place are being consensual is really key, and we'll kind of tease that out more in the scenarios that we do. But for example, it may be someone touching themselves in class, and it might just be that the child needs a little bit more guidance. Those healthy green behaviours may still need a response and can be a really good opportunity to provide support and give information on healthy sexual development and age appropriate information. And then what we've got is we've got two aspects to amber behaviours. So first, we've got the inappropriate level. So they have the potential to be outside of safe and healthy behaviour. So they could be consensual and reciprocal and accepted within a peer group, but the context may be inappropriate. So for example, it might be talking about something they've seen online or on television with friends, but is hugely inappropriate for their age group and stage of development. Once we get into the amber territory of behaviours, you might want to think, what else is happening for that child? Are there any concerns in terms of their behaviour, their presentation, their emotional well-being, their how they're being parented? Are we thinking like that? And at this stage, it's absolutely the time to take note and assess if any, what's the appropriate action that should be taken at this stage. So moving on to more problematic, so slightly further up the scale in terms of the amber behaviours, and have the potential again to be outside of safe and healthy behaviour. So key things is there may be unusual for that particular child or young person, developmentally unusual and socially unexpected, of potential concern due to the activity type, frequency, duration, or context in which they occur. So the activity type might be using or simulating adult sexual references or behaviours. So no other elements of victimisation, but consent might be unclear. So things like the use of adult slang to discuss sex. It might be viewing pornography. It could be some online bullying involving some sexualized language or aggression. And again, it's thinking about what else is happening for that child and are there any concerns? So again, mental health, emotional well-being, how they're being parented, what's the behaviour like, how are they presenting, particularly if it's unusual for that particular child or young person. It's about thinking about those kind of wider issues. And again, it's time to take note and assess what the appropriate action is at this stage.
Jenny, can I just interrupt again? We've just had a question about Hackett. Do they do a specific continuum for special educational needs, or do they not? Is it just all included in the same one?
Not that I'm aware of, because we are going to go on to talk about, obviously, there's the high proportion of children displaying harmful sexual behaviour will have additional needs. Not that I'm aware of, however, it's certainly something I will ask. Maybe the new continuum may include that, but not that I am aware of currently.
Great, thanks.
When we get onto the red harmful behaviours, so they are outside of safe and healthy behaviour, clearly. So excessive, secretive, compulsive, coercive, degrading or threatening. So that force or it involves a significant age, developmental or power imbalance and difference. There's a victimising intent or a victimising outcome, and it's really of concern due to the activity type, the frequency, duration or the context in which they occur, and there is a there's no consent involved, so it's highly intrusive and can be physically violent as well. So in terms of those red behaviours, some examples may be really sexually explicit adult language used taught with younger or less able children, forcing younger children to take part in sexual activities, and these red behaviours need immediate action, immediate intervention. Okay, again, next part of some interaction is what we're going to do is we're going to go through 3 scenarios, and we are going to ask you all to think about, based upon the green, amber, red we've just discussed, whether those scenarios are typical, so green behaviours, whether they're amber, so inappropriate, problematic, whether they are red, so harmful, abusive, violent behaviours. And we want you to post green, amber, red in the chat. And also there will be opportunity to share why you've kind of put that rating in terms of the behaviour. So again, please do feel free to talk and share your thoughts. Any questions or comments before we kind of go into the activity? Okay, I'll take no hands as a no questions. Okay, scenario 1. So the first part of the scenario is Nathan, age 6, Samantha, age 5, and Sol, age 5, are showing each other their private parts behind the bookshelf in the classroom. Now, the first part is all the children are laughing and giggling, although they stop when the teacher comes. They do eventually tell the teacher what they've been doing whilst giggling. So with that in mind, do you think it's green, amber or red?
Yeah, mostly greens, I think. Well, all greens so far. There's someone's put amber.
Okay. Would anybody like to share with us why they think it's green? Raise your hand if you are kind of willing to share. But again, we're not going to put anyone on the spot, so only if you're happy to.
Someone's put maybe because of the similar age, possibly. Normal
Brilliant.
behaviour,
And
exploratory behaviour.
brilliant, yeah. And Tracy, thank you. You've got your hand up. If you'd like to share with us why you think it's green.
Yeah, I put green because you've got them at a similar age group. They're doing it behind the bookshelf, so they tend to suggest they know that they shouldn't really be doing it. They're laughing and giggling. There's no sort of like fear or sort of like pushing people to do it. And then they stop when the teacher comes, so they know it's actually wrong what they've been doing. You know, and so it's just exploratory as far as I would be concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you for those that have commented. Absolutely, sounds quite typical, natural curiosity of children. So yeah, absolutely, green would be correct. Now, if we use the second part, so this is the other outcome. Saul has developmental delay and functions at around age 3. When the teacher comes, he looks confused, and the teacher thinks that whilst Nathan and Samantha understood what they were doing, Saul did not. Saul later showed the teacher some sweets Nathan and Samantha had given him when he showed them his willy. So again, if you could post green, amber, red, whatever your thoughts are in the chat, that would be great.
All amber so far, no greens and also no reds. So everyone's saying amber. Coercion. Yeah, just all ambers so far.
Brilliant. Yeah, again, anybody kind of happy to share why they think amber?
Vulnerable pupil, Kerry says. Low-level coercion, Karen.
Yeah, absolutely. So that giving sweets, there's an element of that coercion there, the child's age and stage of development. So there's an imbalance there in terms of kind of power and developmental differences. However, the behaviours are not adults in itself, so they could reflect kind of that typical developmental curiosity. However, that element of coercion and the differences around age would make it into that amber scale. Okay, thank you, everybody. The next scenario. A 9-year-old boy is at home watching TV with his 6-year-old sister and her friend. The boy is rubbing his penis. The boy appears distracted, and when his dad comes in, he asks him to stop, and he looks embarrassed and stops immediately. So again, if people can put green, amber or red in the comments, that'd be great.
All greens, I think, so far. A couple of ambers. But yeah, mostly green. I'd say maybe 3/4 green, but a few people have put amber.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. So we, based upon the information that is here, we would say green because his embarrassment indicates that he knows it's not appropriate. He could have drifted off and kind of forgotten his surroundings, who's there, who's he with, where is he? He's not in his bedroom on his own. But we do know that children can get comfort from that behaviour. So we would kind of say green. However, I mean, and anyone who put amber who wants to kind of share why is we'd welcome your comments. But however, it could be something more as well. We would go green. It's likely not, but it could be something more. And if this was a repeated behaviour that happens over time and kind of maybe interferes with daily life and functioning, that would then become would become amber. So yeah, we would go for green in this scenario, but we completely understand why those of you who put amber did so. And the next part, the second option is So when his dad enters the room, he sees the boy and notices he has turned to his sister's friend and is making eye contact, having exposed his penis. He asks the girl if she wants to have a go, and the girl looks comfortable. Okay, again, same again. Green, amber or red now?
Everyone so far is going for red for scenario 2. There's an amber, but mostly red.
Yeah. Would anybody be happy to kind of share why they've rated this in that way? You can put it in the comments, or you can pop your hand up, whatever works best.
Melanie's put immediate action would be needed in this situation.
Yep.
Misuse of power.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sally, thanks, Sally.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. So there's a few things, isn't there? There's that kind of element of that the girl looks really uncomfortable. The have a go sounds quite adult in terms of the language, so really inappropriate sort of use of adult language and slang to kind of describe the sexual act. It feels like there's potentially some element of sexual gratification, kind of inappropriate sexual gratification within this scenario. So yeah, red or kind of high end of amber, absolutely. So for those who put red and amber, absolutely, we would agree. But yeah, immediate action should be taken. And this is quite a common scenario that can happen within a home among siblings and friends and family members.
Joe's also put that it doesn't appear to be compulsive behaviour as well, which is interesting. The fact that there seems to be some sense of not necessarily planning, but it doesn't appear to be compulsive.
Yeah, so there's some thought behind it rather than it just being kind of something that happens in the moment. Absolutely, thank you. So, oh, actually, this slide has come up all at once. So if you can kind of bear with us, and what we'll do is we'll do the top section first. So a group of children on the playground are having a sexually explicit conversation. So option 1 is the children are in year 6 and in the same friend group. They're exploring the meaning of some slang words for sexual acts, and all the children are laughing and appear relaxed. So based upon that top paragraph in black writing, do you think it's green, amber or red?
Yeah, all greens for this one.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. And some of those in education might have had experience of a very similar scenario, but absolutely this is green. It's kind of typical curiosity and exploration that children would do. So absolutely we would agree that this is green. And then option 2 is 2 of the children in year 6 and they are with another child from year 1. They're explaining and simulating what sex is. The younger child looks uncertain and goes to walk away. The older children stop him by grabbing his arm. The year 6 children are laughing. When the lunchtime supervisor speaks with the older children, they say that the younger child didn't mind and went along with it. So what would you think about that scenario? Is it green, amber or red?
Got mostly ambers, high amber and a few reds as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a real age difference and a power imbalance in this scenario. Yeah, absolutely. Any other reasons why you put it in high amber red? You pop your comments in the chat.
No consent, someone's put.
Yeah, absolutely. no consent. He's actually prevented from leaving, and he feels really uncomfortable. And again, what are they talking about? What you'd want to know is kind of what language are they using? What are they talking about? Is it adult language they're using and adult behaviours are they describing? Are they being sexually explicit? So absolutely, yeah. And thank you everyone for kind of engaging and kind of sharing your thoughts within that time. Thank you very much so far for your kind of interaction and your time. We're going to take a short break now. So what we'll probably do is come back at 10:30